The morning mist clung to the Danube River like a shroud as Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent gazed across the Hungarian plains toward the fortress of It was August 29, 1526, and the fate of two empires hung in the balance. But this was not merely a clash of armies, it was a collision of legal traditions, a battle that would determine which system of law would govern the heart of Europe. Standing beside his ornate campaign tent, Suleiman contemplated the complex legal framework that had brought him to this moment. The young sultan, barely 32 years old, bore the weight of an empire that stretched from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Red Sea. Unlike his European counterparts who were ruled by divine right alone, Suleiman governed through a sophisticated legal system that balanced three distinct sources of authority: the sacred Sharia law of Islam, the ancient customs of his diverse subjects, and the royal decrees known as Konon that emanated from his own imperial will. The crisis that led to this confrontation had begun 3 years earlier, when King Louis II of Hungary formed an alliance with the Safavid Shah of Persia, the Ottoman Empire's most bitter enemy. This alliance violated the traditional understanding between neighboring rulers and threatened the delicate balance of power that had maintained relative peace along the Ottoman-Hungarian frontier. According to the research published in the Cambridge Law and History Review, the Ottoman sultans deemed it necessary to establish decrees in public law, particularly in ceremony and feudal law, which are absent in Sharia law. This legal flexibility would prove crucial in justifying the coming military campaign. Grand Vizier Pargali Ibrahim Pasha approached the Sultan's pavilion, his footsteps muffled by the Persian carpets that covered the ground. In his hands he carried a leather-bound volume containing the Konan-i Osmani that Suleiman had been carefully crafting since his accession to the throne 6 years earlier. The document represented a revolutionary approach to governance, one that would earn Suleiman the title Kanuni, or the lawgiver, among his subjects, though Europeans would remember him as the Magnificent. "My Sultan Ibrahim," began, his voice measured and respectful, "the Hungarian forces have taken their position. Our scouts report that King Louis commands approximately 30,000 men, including Hungarian knights, Croatian cavalry, and Polish mercenaries. They await us on the plain beyond the village." Suleiman nodded slowly, his dark eyes reflecting the complexity of the decision before him. Under traditional Islamic law, warfare was strictly regulated by divine commandment. The Sharia provided clear guidance on when combat was permissible, how prisoners should be treated, and what constituted just conquest. Yet the Ottoman legal system had evolved beyond these ancient prescriptions, incorporating local customs and royal prerogatives that allowed for greater flexibility in matters of state. The Sultan's legal advisors, including the chief judge of Rumelia and the military judge of Anatolia, had already provided their judgment on the legitimacy of the campaign. They argued that King Louis's alliance with Persia constituted a violation of established treaties and posed a direct threat to Ottoman security. More importantly, they invoked the principle of Orf customary law, which recognized the right of rulers to defend their territories and subjects from foreign aggression. As dawn broke over the Hungarian countryside, Suleiman's army began its final preparations. The Ottoman forces numbered nearly 100,000 men, a massive assemblage that included Janissary infantry, Sipahi cavalry, and skilled artillery units equipped with the latest cannons. Each soldier, from the humblest archer to the most elite guard, understood that they fought not merely for conquest but for the validation of a legal system that had transformed a small Anatolian principality into the most powerful empire in the known world. The Sultan himself donned his battle armor, a magnificent suit of mail and plate decorated with verses from the Quran and Ottoman royal insignia. As he prepared to mount his white stallion, Suleiman reflected on the profound implications of the coming battle. Victory would not only expand Ottoman territory, but would also demonstrate the superiority of their legal system that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining its fundamental principles of justice and divine authority. The pre-dawn hours of August 29th witnessed a scene of extraordinary legal preparation within the Ottoman camp. While European armies typically relied on the simple authority of their monarchs to justify warfare, Suleiman's forces operated under a sophisticated legal framework that required careful documentation and religious sanction before any major military action could commence. Chief Judge Kemal Paşazade, the most senior legal scholar in the Ottoman Empire, had arrived at the army's headquarters 3 days earlier carrying the official legal opinions, or fatwas, that would provide religious justification for the coming battle. These documents, meticulously prepared by the empire's leading Islamic scholars, represented the culmination of months of legal deliberation in Islam. The process demonstrated the unique nature of Ottoman governance, where even the Sultan's military campaigns required validation from multiple sources of legal authority. The Hungarian challenge to Ottoman authority had created a complex legal puzzle. King Louis II's alliance with Shah Tahmasp of Persia was not merely a diplomatic inconvenience. It constituted a direct violation of the established international order that the Ottomans had worked decades to construct. Under Islamic law, treaties with neighboring powers were considered sacred obligations, and their violation provided legitimate grounds for military response. However, the Ottoman legal system went further. incorporating elements of customary law that recognized the rights of rulers to protect their subjects and defend their territorial integrity. Suleiman convened his war council in the largest tent, its interior illuminated by dozens of oil lamps that cast dancing shadows on the silk-draped walls. The assembly included not only military commanders but also legal experts, religious scholars, and representatives of the diverse communities that made up the Ottoman Empire. This inclusive approach to decision-making reflected the fundamental principle of Ottoman governance, that legitimate authority derived not from a single source but from the careful balance of religious law, customary practice, and royal decree. "The Hungarian king has chosen his path," announced Grand Vizier Ibrahim, his voice carrying across the assembled officials. "Our spies report that he has refused our final offer of peaceful resolution and has instead strengthened his alliance with the Persian Shah. According to both the Sharia and our established customs, we have exhausted all diplomatic alternatives." The military commanders nodded in agreement, but the legal scholars required more detailed justification. Judge Kemal Pashazad rose to address the assembly, his aged voice carrying the weight of decades of legal scholarship. He explained that the Ottoman legal system recognized three categories of legitimate warfare: defensive wars against direct aggression, expeditions to spread the faith, and campaigns to restore violated treaties. The Hungarian situation fell clearly into the third category, as King Louis had not only allied with Persia but had also encouraged raids by Wallachan and Moldovan forces against Ottoman territories. The integration of customary law into Ottoman jurisprudence represented one of Suleiman's most significant legal innovations. Unlike purely Islamic states that relied exclusively on religious law, the Ottoman Empire recognized the validity of local customs and practices, provided they did not directly contradict fundamental Islamic principles. This flexibility allowed the empire to govern its diverse population more effectively while maintaining religious legitimacy. As the legal council concluded its deliberations, Suleiman issued the formal declaration that would authorize the attack on Hungarian forces. The document, written in elegant Ottoman Turkish and sealed with the Sultan's personal tughra, represented a masterpiece of legal craftsmanship. It cited specific verses from the Quran, referenced established Islamic legal precedents, acknowledged the customary rights of rulers to defend their realms, and invoked the Sultan's authority to issue binding decrees in matters of state security. The declaration would be read aloud to the assembled troops before the battle commenced, ensuring that every soldier understood the legal and religious justification for their actions. This practice, unique to the Ottoman military system, reflected the empire's commitment to ruling through law rather than mere force. Even in the heat of military campaign, the Ottomans maintained their sophisticated legal framework, demonstrating that their system of governance was not merely theoretical but practical and adaptable to real-world challenges. As the first light of dawn began to illuminate the Hungarian plain, the Ottoman army prepared to put their legal principles to the ultimate test on the field of battle. The morning sun cast long shadows across the battlefield, as two fundamentally different legal traditions prepared for their ultimate confrontation. On one side stood the Hungarian forces, representing the feudal legal system of medieval Europe, where authority flowed from personal oaths of loyalty and divine right monarchy. On the other, the Ottoman army embodied a sophisticated legal framework that had evolved to govern one of the world's most diverse empires through the careful integration of religious law, customary practice, and royal decree. King Louis II of Hungary rode among his troops, his young face marked by the weight of responsibility that had fallen upon him at the age of 20. The Hungarian legal system, based on the Golden Bull of 1222 and subsequent royal decree, granted significant autonomy to the nobility while maintaining the king's ultimate authority over matters of war and peace. This decentralized approach to governance had served Hungary well during centuries of conflict with various enemies, but it had also created internal divisions that would prove costly in the coming battle. The Hungarian army's composition reflected the complexities of medieval European legal arrangements. Croatian cavalry units fought under the banner of their ban, owing allegiance to the Hungarian crown through ancient feudal contracts. Polish mercenaries served for agreed-upon payments, their obligations defined by written agreements that specified the duration and nature of their service. Hungarian knights fought according to the Code of Chivalry, a legal and moral framework that governed their conduct both on and off the battlefield. In contrast, the Ottoman forces operated under a unified legal system that had been carefully developed over 2 centuries of imperial expansion. Every soldier, from the elite Janissary corps to the irregular Akinci raiders, understood their place within a comprehensive legal framework that defined their rights, responsibilities, and rewards. This system had been codified in the Kanuni Janissary and similar documents that regulated other military units. The Ottoman legal approach to warfare demonstrated remarkable sophistication in its treatment of conquered territories and populations. While European armies often relied on traditional rights of conquest, the Ottomans had developed a complex system of law that governed the treatment of defeated enemies, the administration of occupied territories, and the integration of new subjects into the empire. This legal framework would prove crucial in the aftermath of the coming battle, as it provided clear guidelines for governing newly conquered Hungarian lands. Suleiman's position as both Sultan and Caliph gave him unique legal authority that combined temporal and spiritual power. However, this authority was not absolute. It was constrained by Islamic law, tempered by established customs, and exercised through a sophisticated bureaucracy of legal experts and administrators. The Ottoman system of governance represented a careful balance between central authority and local autonomy, between religious law and practical necessity. As the two armies drew closer to engagement, the contrasting legal traditions became increasingly apparent. The Hungarian forces arranged themselves according to feudal hierarchies, with noble cavalry in the center and common soldiers on the flanks. Their battle tactics relied on individual courage and personal honor, values that were deeply embedded in the European chivalric tradition. The Hungarian battle cry of Jesus and Mary reflected the Christian religious foundation of their legal and social system. The Ottoman army, by contrast, deployed according to carefully planned tactical principles that had been developed through decades of military experience and legal code. The Janissary Corps took their positions in the center, their discipline and training reflecting the rigorous legal framework that governed their recruitment, training, and service. The Sipahi cavalry arranged themselves on the flanks, their tactics coordinated through a sophisticated command structure that exemplified Ottoman administrative efficiency. The legal implications of the coming battle extended far beyond the immediate military outcome. Victory for either side would validate not merely military superiority, but also the effectiveness of their respective legal systems. The Hungarian feudal approach emphasized personal loyalty and individual valor, while the Ottoman system stressed collective discipline and institutional authority. The collision of these two legal traditions would determine the future governance of Central Europe for centuries to come. The battle commenced at precisely 10 o'clock in the morning with a thunderous roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the legal order in Central Europe. The Ottoman artillery, positioned according to the tactical principles codified in the Kanuniyat, the legal code governing military equipment and deployment, opened fire with devastating effect. The Hungarian forces, arranged in the traditional feudal manner with armored knights in the center, had never experienced such coordinated firepower. Sultan Suleiman observed the opening phases of the battle from his command position, surrounded by his legal advisors and military commanders. The scene before him represented more than a military engagement. It was a test of the legal principles that had guided Ottoman expansion for over 2 centuries. The empire's success had always depended on its ability to adapt its legal framework to new circumstances while maintaining core principles of justice and divine authority. The Hungarian response to the Ottoman attack revealed the strengths and weaknesses of their legal system. Individual Hungarian knights demonstrated extraordinary courage, charging forward in accordance with a chivalric code that emphasized personal honor above tactical consideration. However, their lack of centralized command structure, a natural consequence of their feudal legal system, prevented effective coordination between different units. Count Tomori, the Hungarian commander, attempted to rally his forces through appeals to feudal loyalty and Christian duty. His authority derived from ancient legal traditions that granted noble commanders significant autonomy in military matters. However, this same legal framework that empowered individual nobles also made it difficult to implement unified tactical plans or maintain discipline under pressure. The Ottoman military response demonstrated the practical advantages of their integrated legal system. The Janissary Corps, recruited according to the Devshirme system and trained under strict legal regulations, maintained perfect discipline even under intense pressure. Their legal obligation to the Sultan superseded all other loyalties, creating a unity of purpose that proved decisive in the heat of battle. As the battle progressed, the superior organization of the Ottoman forces became increasingly apparent. Their tactical formations, developed through decades of military experience and codified in official regulations, allowed them to concentrate their firepower effectively while maintaining defensive positions. The Hungarian cavalry charges, though brave, were systematically disrupted by coordinated Ottoman defensive measures. The legal implications of the battle's progression extended beyond immediate military considerations. Under Ottoman law, the conduct of warfare was strictly regulated by both religious and secular authorities. The treatment of prisoners, the protection of and the disposition of captured territory were all governed by detailed legal provisions that had been developed through centuries of Islamic jurisprudence and Ottoman administrative practice. Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, commanding the Ottoman right flank, exemplified the integration of legal and military authority that characterized the Ottoman system. His position as both chief administrator and military commander reflected the empire's approach to governance, where legal expertise and practical experience were considered equally important qualifications for leadership. The Hungarian forces, despite their individual courage, found themselves increasingly overwhelmed by the systematic application of Ottoman military doctrine. Their feudal legal system, which had evolved to govern a relatively small kingdom, proved inadequate for coordinating the complex defensive requirements of a major battle against a sophisticated enemy. As the afternoon wore on, the outcome of the battle became increasingly clear. The The Ottoman forces had successfully implemented their tactical plans. While the Hungarian army struggled to maintain cohesion under the pressure of sustained attack, the legal frameworks that had brought both armies to this battlefield were about to be tested in the most fundamental way possible through victory or defeat in mortal combat. King Louis II, observing the deteriorating situation of his forces, faced a decision that would have profound legal implications. Under Hungarian law, a king's primary obligation was to preserve the realm and protect his subjects. However, the chivalric code that governed noble behavior emphasized personal honor and courage in the face of adversity. These conflicting legal principles would ultimately determine the young king's fate and the future of the Hungarian kingdom. The thunder of Ottoman cannons continued to echo across the battlefield, each shot representing not merely military force but the projection of a legal system that had proven its effectiveness through conquest and governance across 3 continents. By early afternoon, the fate of the Hungarian kingdom hung by a thread as thin as the legal documents that had brought these 2 armies to this fateful confrontation. The Ottoman forces, operating under their sophisticated legal framework, had systematically dismantled the Hungarian defensive positions through coordinated attacks that demonstrated the practical superiority of their integrated command structure. King Louis II found himself trapped between conflicting legal obligations. As his army crumbled around him, the Hungarian constitutional tradition, embodied in the Golden Bull and subsequent royal decrees, required the king to preserve the realm at all costs. However, the chivalric code that governed noble behavior demanded that he share the fate of his knights on the battlefield. This tension between institutional preservation and personal honor would prove decisive in the battle's final phase. The Ottoman legal system faced no such contradictions. Suleiman's authority as both sultan and caliph provided clear guidance for all military decisions. While the established Qanun regulations offered specific protocols for every aspect of warfare, the empire's legal traditions emphasized collective success over individual glory, a principle that had enabled Ottoman forces to conquer territories from the gates of Vienna to the shores of the Indian Ocean. As the Hungarian center began to collapse under sustained Ottoman pressure, the legal implications of defeat became increasingly apparent. Under Islamic law, conquered territories could be incorporated into the empire through established legal procedures that protected the rights of non-Muslim subjects while ensuring their integration into the Ottoman administrative system. This legal framework would prove crucial in the aftermath of the battle, as it provided clear guidelines for governing the Hungarian population. The final Hungarian cavalry charge, led by King Louis himself, represented a desperate attempt to salvage both military honor and legal legitimacy. The young king, mounted on his destrier and accompanied by his most loyal nobles, charged directly into the Ottoman center in a display of personal courage that epitomized the chivalric ideal. However, individual heroism, no matter how inspiring, could not overcome the systematic application of superior military doctrine. The Ottoman response to the Hungarian charge demonstrated the effectiveness of their legal and military integration. The Janissary Corps, trained under strict legal regulations and bound by oath to the Sultan, maintained their formations despite the ferocity of the attack. Their disciplined volleys, coordinated with artillery support, systematically destroyed the Hungarian cavalry charge and sealed the fate of the Hungarian kingdom. King Louis II fell during this final desperate assault, his death marking not only the end of a royal dynasty but also the collapse of a legal system that had governed Hungary for centuries. The young king's fate exemplified the tragic consequences of legal frameworks that prioritized individual honor over collective survival, a lesson that would resonate throughout European politics for generations to come. The Ottoman victory at Mohacs represented more than military conquest. It validated a legal system, had proven its effectiveness through centuries of expansion and governance. The empire's ability to integrate religious law, customary practice, and royal decree into a coherent framework for governance had enabled it to defeat enemies, administer diverse populations, and maintain stability across vast territories. Sultan Suleiman surveying the battlefield as Hungarian resistance finally collapsed. I understood that his victory represented the triumph of legal principles as much as military might. The Ottoman system's flexibility, which allowed adaptation to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles, had proven superior to the rigid feudal structures that had governed medieval Europe. The legal aftermath of the battle would prove as significant as the military outcome. Within days, Ottoman legal experts would begin the process of incorporating Hungarian territories into the empire, applying established legal procedures that had been developed through centuries of conquest and administration. The Hungarian population would discover that Ottoman rule, while foreign, operated under a sophisticated legal framework that protected their rights while demanding their loyalty. As the sun set over the battlefield of Mohacs, the age of Ottoman legal supremacy in Central Europe had begun. The empire's unique system of governance, balancing religious law, customary practice, and royal decree, had proven its worth through the ultimate test of battle. The The legal principles that had guided Suleiman's army to victory would now be applied to govern the conquered territories, beginning a new chapter in the long history of Ottoman expansion and legal development. The aftermath of the Battle of Mohawks on August 29, 1520, marked not merely the end of Hungarian independence but the beginning of a new era in European legal history, as Ottoman forces secured the battlefield and began the process of occupation. The sophisticated legal framework that had enabled their victory would now face its greatest test: the peaceful governance of a conquered Christian population. Sultan Suleiman's first act after the battle demonstrated the practical application of Ottoman legal principles, rather than allowing his soldiers to engage in unrestricted plunder, as was common in European warfare. The Sultan immediately implemented the established legal procedures for dealing with conquered territories. The Konai-Araya, the legal code governing non-Muslim subjects, provided specific guidelines for protecting the rights of the Hungarian population while integrating them into the Ottoman administrative system. The Hungarian legal system, which had evolved over centuries to govern a relatively homogeneous Christian population, simply ceased to exist with the death of King Louis II. However, the Ottoman legal framework was specifically designed to accommodate diverse populations and legal traditions. This flexibility, which had enabled the empire to govern subjects from the Balkans to the Middle East, would prove crucial in establishing stable rule over the newly conquered Hungarian territories. Grand Vizier Ibrahim Pasha, tasked with implementing Ottoman legal procedures in Hungary, faced the complex challenge of balancing imperial authority with local traditions. The Ottoman legal system recognized the validity of local customs provided they did not contradict fundamental Islamic principles or imperial decrees. This approach, codified in the Kanuni Orf, allowed Hungarian nobles who submitted to Ottoman authority to maintain many of their traditional privileges, while accepting the Sultan's ultimate sovereignty. The integration of Hungarian territories into the Ottoman legal system proceeded according to established procedures that had been refined through centuries of conquests and administration. Local Hungarian administrators who demonstrated loyalty to the new regime were retained in their positions, while Ottoman legal experts worked to harmonize local customs with imperial law. This process, known as Kanuni Sedek, represented one of the most sophisticated approaches to legal integration in the pre-modern world. The religious dimensions of Ottoman legal governance presented particular challenges in predominantly Christian Hungary. Islamic law required the protection of people of the book, including Christians, but also imposed specific obligations and restrictions on non-Muslim subjects. The Ottoman legal system addressed these complexities through detailed regulations that protected Christian religious practices while ensuring their political loyalty to the Sultan. The economic implications of the Ottoman legal system proved particularly significant for the Hungarian population. The empire's tax system, codified in the Kanuni Root, was generally more systematic and predictable than the feudal obligations that had characterized Hungarian society. Hungarian peasants, who had been subject to arbitrary noble demands under the old system, found themselves protected by Ottoman legal provisions that limited taxation and prevented abuse by local administrators. The Battle of Mohawks had demonstrated the military effectiveness of the Ottoman legal system, but the subsequent decades of peaceful governance would prove the lasting value of their legal innovations. The empire's ability to maintain stability while governing diverse populations became a model for other expanding states, influencing legal development from Spain to Russia. Suleiman's reputation as Kanuni was secured not only by his military victories but by his systematic development of legal codes that governed every aspect of Ottoman society. The legal principles tested at Mohawks would continue to evolve throughout his reign, reaching their fullest expression in the comprehensive legal reforms that transformed the Ottoman Empire into one of the most sophisticated states in the early modern world. The legacy of the legal system that triumphed at Mohawks extended far beyond the Ottoman Empire itself. European observers, initially dismissive of Islamic law and Ottoman customs, gradually recognized the practical advantages of a legal system that could adapt to changing circumstances while maintaining core principles of justice and governance. This recognition would eventually influence legal development throughout Europe, contributing to the gradual modernization of European legal systems. The Battle of Mohawks thus represents a crucial moment in the history of legal development, demonstrating how the careful balance of religious law, customary practice, and royal decree could create a framework for governance that was both flexible and effective. The Ottoman legal system's triumph on that August day in 1526 would shape the political and legal landscape of Central Europe for centuries to come, leaving a lasting legacy that continues to influence legal thought and practice to this day.